The Tennessee Titans may be 1-3, but it's not all bad. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of Locked On Titans is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I know the Tennessee Titans are 1-3, and there's been a lot of negativity in the fan base, but I want to take more of a holistic look at the first month of the season so far, because not everything has been bad, and there's been a lot that the Tennessee Titans have gotten right. Now, of course, there are some things that have gone wrong. We'll talk about those as well, and we'll look forward at what needs to improve for the Titans to get this thing back on track. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. And if you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, because Sunday I'm going to do a mock draft Monday, our first of the season, and look at what could be around the corner for the Tennessee Titans in the draft. Also, we're going to take a look at the remainder of the schedule for the Tennessee Titans, how they stack up against the AFC after week 5 in the NFL. And then before you know it, it'll be Thursday, and we got crossover Thursday with the Indianapolis Colts. So make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. With that being said, do want to talk about some things that have gone right for the Tennessee Titans, because again, although they are 1-3, and although there's a lot of negativity flying around in my comment section, online, all of that, a lot of what the Titans wanted to do coming into the year has come to fruition. We have seen a lot of things go right for the Titans, and first and foremost, on the offensive line. So I think seeing Mason Rudolph against the Miami Dolphins is a sobering fact, I guess, that the offensive line was able to run block with success. They ran the ball very well in that game. Only one sack on Mason Rudolph in that game. And I think the reality is the offensive line's issues. I'm not saying that the Titans have a good offensive line. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But I'm saying everybody's saying, oh, they can't win with this offensive line. The offensive line is the only reason this team is bad. But well, I think we saw on Monday night that may not be as true as maybe some of us have thought. I think there's a lot of redeeming qualities to this offensive line, and we've seen certain players play very well. I think the reality here is that Will Levis at quarterback, a lot of quarterbacks will tell you that sacks and pressures and all of that, a lot of that is dependent on the quarterback. And while there are some circumstances, like think about Jalen Duncan and Nicholas Petit-Ferrer against the Green Bay Packers, that's not Will Levis's fault on a couple of those sacks. But there were at least 2 sacks against the Green Bay Packers where it was Will Levis's fault. He stepped into pressure. He didn't make the right decision. So some of the offensive line struggles, you could actually look and say, hey, maybe Will Levis could have got the ball out quicker. Maybe Will Levis shouldn't have drifted towards pressure. Maybe Will Levis could have stepped up in the pocket. I think some of the hate that the offensive line has got is kind of due to Will Levis's struggles. Think about JC Latham. Latham has been one of the best rookies in the NFL so far this year. I mean, he gave up 1 sack and 9 pressures, and 5 of those pressures and that 1 sack came in week 1. So for 3 straight weeks, JC Latham has been a very good player. I know that Peter Skoronski has had his issues, but Lloyd Cushenberry has yet to give up a sack. Lloyd Cushenberry has been good. I'm not going to say great, but Lloyd Cushenberry has been good. And I think Dylan Radins, while having his own struggles, Radins has been very solid for the Tennessee Titans. So I think that the offensive line is not as bad as we seem. And when all of us were saying, hey, we want this offensive line, maybe they're not going to go to a top 10 offensive line. Maybe they're not going to be one of the best offensive lines in the league. But if the Titans offensive line just took steps forward, that would be very helpful. So I think you look at Latham, you look at Cushenberry, you look at Radens. There are things to be excited about with this offensive line. And we knew it was a young group that just got together and they would take some time to gel. So I'm very optimistic about the O-line going forward. Also, I know that the statistics have been up and down, but we've seen DeAndre Hopkins over the last few weeks start to make an impact. We've seen Calvin Ridley in the first 2 weeks of the season make a great impact. Tyler Boyd is starting to come around. I think, again, I hate to pin things on Will Levis consistently, but at the same time, Will Levis has not been good enough. And I think the wide receivers, Calvin Ridley's been one of the best separators in the NFL so far this year. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins, who was banged up early, start to turn it around. So I think this wide receiver core has kind of lived up to what we expected, and the quarterback issues and some of the O-line issues have not allowed the wide receiver group to maybe show the statistical side of things as much as we were hoping for. But they have been good. Also, look at the run game. Tony Pollard has been good. I would say Tony Pollard has been great for this Tennessee Titans team. Tajay Spears was a little bit banged up in the last few weeks, but we saw Tajay Spears make a great play for a touchdown on Monday night. He's still got the burst. He's made some plays in the screen game as well. Tajay Spears is exactly who we wanted Tajay Spears to be, and Tony Pollard has fit seamlessly right in. Also, got to give credit to Mason Rudolph. When Mason Rudolph was signed, I was excited because Mason Rudolph is a very good backup quarterback, one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think we saw on Monday night exactly why I said that, and that is exactly true. Some of you guys are calling for Mason Rudolph to start. Some of you guys are saying that Mason Rudolph could lead the Titans to the playoffs and is good enough to be a full-time starter in the NFL. And that's a step too far, in my opinion. But we can meet in the middle and say that Mason Rudolph is a very good backup quarterback. And that is exactly what the Tennessee Titans wanted when they signed him. So you look at Cushenberry, you look at Ridley, you look at Pollard, you look at Rudolph. I mean, a lot of these moves that Ran Carthon made, you look at the draft pick, JC Latham, a lot of the moves that Ran Carthon has made this offseason are working. Nick Folk has been fantastic. I didn't give Nick Folk enough credit on Monday night's reaction show, and I have been thinking about it all week. Nick Folk has been exactly what we expected and better. He had 2 50-yarders on Monday night. Nobody expected Nick Folk to be banging 50-yarders home before the season. So that has all gone incredibly well. Okay? Jaquan Jackson, the other offensive rookie that the Titans drafted. I talked about it coming into week 4 or out of week 4, coming into week 5, top 10 in punt and kickoff return average, top 3 in punt return yards, top 10 in kickoff return yards. Like Jaquan Jackson has been the returner that we were all hoping that we would get. Consistent, catches the ball, gets yards. It hasn't been absolutely beautiful. He's not making the Pro Bowl anytime soon, but he has been one of the top 10 returners in the NFL so far this year. So you look at all of that. I mean, think about the defense. Harold Landry, 4 sacks in 4 games. T'Vondre Sweat is the defensive rookie of the year right now. Keandre Coburn, I was worried about the depth. Now, Coburn's going to be out a few weeks with an injury, but he's been very solid behind Jeffery Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat. Sebastian Joseph Day has been a fantastic signing. He's not a starter. He's not an all-star, but he's a very solid starter for this team. Ernest Jones, he's the best linebacker. That's a linebacker that they can keep around for a few years. What a great trade by Ran Carthon. L'Jarius Sneed has locked down all of his matchups if you look at the statistics. Roger McCreary has been solid. Quandre Diggs has been a very good player for the Titans at safety. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. comes in, 1 start as a rookie, and is one of the better players in that game on Monday night. So almost all of Ran Carthon's free agent signings and almost all of Ran Carthon's draft picks have been good. I mean, Jalen Harrell hasn't made a big splash, but he's a 7th-round rookie who's been a rotational player. Like, I know they're 1-3. I know some of the things that we wanted to see do well have not gone well, particularly at quarterback. But take a step back for a minute, take a deep breath, and realize a lot of what Ran Carthon had tried to do for this season is working. It is working. And that's why the Titans can turn things around. Now, what isn't working? We got to talk about things that have gone wrong in the first month of the season, and then what the Titans need to do to turn this thing back around. Before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. So PrizePicks is the most exciting, most fun, and easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. There's a reason that they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks makes daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. All you have to do is pick more or less. This is why I personally love PrizePicks. You look at the statistical projections from PrizePicks. Mason Rudolph, 75 passing yards. Tony Pollard, 75 rushing yards. DeAndre Hopkins, 2.5 catches. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and say whether they're going to do more or less. And you got a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Make sure that you run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Look, again, I couldn't explain it any better. It's so easy. It's so much fun. More or less, you guys got to download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Go to PrizePicks, download the app, promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Kind of doing a recap of the first month of the season, in my opinion, player by player, looking at everybody on the team. We talked about all of the great stuff that's happening, the good stuff that's happening for the Titans, the draft picks, the free agent signings, the run game. I mean, the defense is number 1 in the NFL. So there's a lot of good in there. I know that a lot of people are in my comments with negativity, and I understand that they're 1-3 and it's hard to be as positive as maybe we should be, but just make sure you see the forest through the trees. Okay, that's all I'm saying, or however that saying goes. It's a complicated one in my opinion, but I do have to be realistic. You guys know I'm known as a pessimist. I am known as the negative guy on Titans Twitter and all of that, but you know, that's why I wanted to talk the positive first, because there's a lot more positive than there is negative. It's just the negative stuff is damning. You know, it's very damaging. It's like, you know, hard to withstand. You know, the good stuff is like pepper and bullets from a handgun, and the bad stuff is like a rocket launcher. You know, it's like how they say that airplanes are statistically safer than cars because there are more car wrecks than airplanes, but the fatality rate on an airplane crash is way higher than car crashes. You know, like, yeah, it's safer, but if I get in a plane crash, I'm dead. If I get in a car accident, I'll probably survive. So with it, which I know a lot about, as a matter of fact. But let's talk about some of the things that have not gone right. And obviously that starts with Will Levis. It's upsetting. You know, a lot of people out there are so excited that Will Levis is doing poorly. They wanted him to do poorly. There are Titans fans out there that would rather Will Levis do poorly so that they can be right about Will Levis than Will Levis do good so that the Titans could be good. Some people would rather the team do poorly so that they can be right about Will. And I think that that's absurd. Again, I would bring it back to T'Vondre Sweat. I was wrong about T'Vondre Sweat. And some people think that I would rather be right and Sweat suck so that I could be right than Sweat be good and help the team win, which I think is insane. No matter what, above all things, I want the Tennessee Titans to be good. It makes me happy. It brings me joy. You know, like, I'm just a football fan who wants my team to win. You know what I mean? So those of you out there who are so excited, who are getting off on Will Levis playing poorly, like, seek help. That's all I have to say. But the reality is Levis has not played well. And it's the turnovers. It's the holding the ball. It's the pocket movement. And if we're honest, a lot of that stuff is you watch his college tape at Kentucky, and that is the stuff that stands out too. He was a turnover guy. He was a guy who didn't have great poise and calmness in the pocket. He's very frantic. He's overly aggressive and reckless. And And he has the big arm, and he can make the big throws, and he plays with a fearlessness that is endearing. You know what I mean? But the reality is it's a Jekyll and Hyde situation. And so far this year, we have gotten all Dr. Jekyll and no Mr. Hyde, or Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll, whatever it happens to be. You know what I mean? Like, we have gotten all of the bad Will Levis with very little of the good Will Levis. And I think that it is fair. I think saying the Titans would be 3-1 if they played Mason Rudolph all the games, I think that's a bit optimistic. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I think 2-2 is the only fair way that you could say it. The Titans would be 2-2 because I think the Titans would have won that game against the Chicago Bears if they didn't have the Will Levis meltdown in the second half. But against the Jets, I mean, the defense let down against the Jets, and the Jets have a really good defense too. So I think 2-2 is the only fair thing to say. I'm not saying it's impossible they would be 3-1, but 2-2 seems like the fair conclusion if we want to just be fair and logical. So the reality is Will Levis has to play better. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but it has not been good, and it has cost the team at least one win, in my opinion, Will Levis's performance. So that is frustrating, because we all needed Will Levis to be better, and we thought, you know, Bill Callahan and the O-line improvements and bringing in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and bringing in Brian Callahan, who's had a history of success with quarterbacks. Like, we all expected that Will Levis would take a jump, and he has not. He has gone backwards. And I think that part of that is, you know, the system that the Titans want to be, which I agree with Brian Callahan. This is the system the Titans should be running. The system the Titans want to be is quick timing. It's reading the defense quick. It's processing fast. It's being accurate, you know? And Will Levis, maybe that's not his strong suit. You know, maybe he is unable to play football that way. I think that's a possibility. Now, anytime you get into a new job, you get into, you know, a new system at work that you have to use, it does take time to figure those things out. And that's why I've been saying the Titans need to stick with Will Levis, and the Titans need to start Will Levis to make sure that we don't have a Sam Darnold, a Baker Mayfield, a Geno Smith. Like, the worst thing that could happen is the Titans give up on Will Levis and they jettison him somewhere else, and then he becomes a successful quarterback. Like, you have to allow young quarterbacks some time to see what they could do. So I say all that, but the reality is Will Levis has hurt this football team. That has gone wrong. But I would also say there are some really disappointing things. Peter Skoronski has had good moments, but he hasn't been good enough. And teams are attacking him with blitzes and stunts. They're really going after him, and his hands have not been strong enough, and his anchor has not been strong enough. We all thought Pete got stronger, and he has. He's clearly bigger and stronger, but is it enough? Is it enough? I don't know. He has not been good enough this year. Obviously, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer has not been good enough, but if you listen to this podcast, you would know that I've been saying throughout the entire offseason that it's a mistake to only rely on Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. The Titans should have brought in a veteran. The Titans should have signed somebody. The Titans should have taken it more seriously in free agency. They put themselves in this position, and that is on Rancor Thon. You know, at the end of the day, that's the guy who builds the roster. Treylon Burks has been a complete disappointment as well. I had somebody say, Treylon Burks caught a pass in my comments on Monday night. Like, what, am I supposed to throw a parade because he caught one effing pass? Like, let's come on. You know, he's been a disappointment. He's dropped more passes this year than he's caught. So calm down with that. Ryan Stonehouse has not been good enough. Part of the issues with the punt blocks, this is like Will Levis with the offensive line. It's not all on the protection. All right. Ryan Stonehouse takes a long time to get that ball out, and he's got to move quicker, and he's got to be better. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you know, Jeffery Simmons missed the game, but Simmons has not been impactful enough. That's just the reality. He has not been impactful enough when he's been out on the field. He's been good, but he hasn't been great. And when you're getting paid $100 million, you need to be great. And Simmons has not been great this year. He's been good, not great. I think that Amani Hooker has been okay. Kenneth Murray and the tight ends have been okay. I'm not going to put them in bad, but they've just been okay. But Jamal Adams has not been good. He's played 5 snaps this year. He's missed a couple of tackles. He's made 0 impact at all. And Elijah Molden is the better player. Elijah Molden right now is graded as one of the best safeties in the NFL. So the Titans made a bet on Denard Wilson getting the most out of Jamal Adams and gave away Elijah Molden when Elijah Molden is the better player. And ain't no revisionist history here. I told you when Jamal Adams was signed that Elijah Molden was the better player. So there's some things on defense that I want to see be better as well. Like Arden Key has just been okay, but Simmons has not been good enough. Adams has not been good enough. And now Cheeto Awuzie is hurt, and he's been hurt the last few years, so we can't be shocked about that, right? So that's the stuff that has not gone well. But what needs to happen for the Titans to turn this thing around? Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, Titans fans, yes, I'm talking to you, Titans fans. You could start the second quarter of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets on FanDuel. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And look, I got to tell you guys, the Buffalo Bills -1.5 against the Texans this weekend. The Indianapolis Colts getting 2.5 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Why? For what reason? Doesn't make any sense. The Vikings at home -2.5. The Vikings are my hammer of the week. The Vikings are going to murder the New York Jets. It is a bad matchup. Make sure that you go check out all those odds. If you like any of those, you know what to do, and you can do it at FanDuel.com. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about what's gone right, what's gone wrong, some things that have just been okay. But now I want to get into things that need to improve. Let's spin it forward and look ahead at what the Titans need to do going forward to fix this thing, okay? Before I do, thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. On Sunday night into Monday morning, whenever you decide to listen, and obviously be up on Sunday night. But I'm going to do a mock draft Monday just to talk about, what we've seen so far, what the Titans need to be focused on, quarterback, wide receiver, edge, all that different stuff. Going to have those conversations. Tuesday, we're going to look at the AFC and look at what needs to happen for the Titans within the division, within the conference, for them to maybe turn this thing around as well. So we'll look at it from that sort of angle. A lot of stuff coming up. Titans are back. They have a division game, so you're not going to want to miss the content I'm putting up next week. But looking forward here, number one on my list is the turnovers, and it's twofold, okay? So the Titans finally forced, I'm using air quotes for that, forced a turnover on Monday night. Really, Tyler Huntley threw it backwards, and Tyreek Hill dropped the ball. Tyreek Hill needs to catch that. I mean, Tyler Huntley didn't throw a perfect pass, but it hit Tyreek Hill in both of his hands going forward. Like, you can't drop that pass. That's not a good way to help your third-string quarterback. I traded Tyreek Hill in my fantasy football league to get Amon-Ra St. Brown. Boom. Love that move. But anyways, the Titans have only forced one turnover on defense. And when Denard Wilson was hired, we expected better than that. One turnover forced in 4 games, that's awful. I don't care how you slice it. I don't care that they're number one in yards and all this. Like, you need to force turnovers in the modern day NFL. You're not going to win by just locking people down yards-wise. Like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And a lot of that comes from the pass rush. The Titans' pass rush has not been good enough. And, Tavondre Sweat has been good, but the pass rush hasn't been fantastic. And like we talked about with Jeffery Simmons, he's been good, but they pay Simmons to be great and be a game wrecker, and he hasn't been that. You don't pay $100 million for a decoy that lets Harold Landry get sacks. You pay $100 million for a decoy who can let other people get sacks and someone who gets their own production. Like, it's not good enough to be like, hey, watch the film. Simmons is still taking a lot of attention. Okay, yeah, that's great. But when you get paid $100 million, you are expected to put numbers in the box score as well. So the pass rush has to get better, and the turnovers have to come in bunches. Like, the Titans have to start turning teams over, and they're going to play the Indianapolis Colts. If Anthony Richardson plays in that game, which I expect him to do, Anthony Richardson has been right with Will Levis in terms of turnovers. And then they play the Buffalo Bills. And if you're going to beat the Buffalo Bills, you need to create turnovers on Josh Allen and his reckless play. That is a reality. So if the Titans don't start to create more turnovers, they can hold teams down with the yards all they want. It's not going to be good enough. You have to create turnovers. And obviously on the offensive side of the ball, they have to stop turning it over. The Titans lead the NFL in turnovers right now. Like, you're never going to win games if you're giving the ball away. The Titans aren't good enough to play that way. It's just not good enough. So if they don't start to have a positive turnover margin in the rest of these games, it's over before it begins. And that's the number one thing. It's turnovers on defense and offense. Stop turning it over at the rate you are and start getting some more turnovers. Like, there's no way the Titans are going to turn this around if they don't do that. There's no way it happens. A lot of that is going to come to the passing game. Like, the Titans have shown that they're a good running team. The Titans can be a good running football team, but they're making it easy on defenses with the lack of production in the pass game. Teams are firing downhill. It's really a repeat of the last 2 years for the Titans. Teams are so unafraid of the passing game that they're firing downhill with reckless abandon. And when you do that, it's hard to play action because they're not scared, and it's hard to run the ball because there's penetration in the backfield. Like, it's hard to play offense when no one is scared of your passing game. So the Titans have to find a way to attack downfield and start having some success in the passing game. And obviously, a lot of that has to do with Will Levis. And the problem is the Titans are not going to be able to do that with Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph doesn't have a strong enough arm. He's a dink and dunk champion, and I want that for my backup. But you have to have someone who can aggressively move the ball down the field to keep defenses honest. And that's why Levis has to go back in, because Rudolph cannot do that. So if this passing game doesn't turn things around, the run game is not going to be able to shine like it should. Okay? And then finally, special teams. Obviously, the blocked punts. Obviously, the blocked punts are a problem. And the Titans almost had another one blocked on Monday night. But it's more than that. It's coverage. I'm okay with the returns. Like I mentioned earlier, Jaquan Jackson has been fine this year. He's been good this year. Top 10 returner. But the coverage teams have not been. It seems like every single game, the Titans allow a big return in punt coverage or in kickoff coverage. And look, it may be individual errors, but as things stand right now, Colt Anderson is not him. Colt Anderson was a young special teams guy who Brian Callahan brought over from Cincinnati to give him a shot. He's not good enough. He has not been good enough. And you could say, Jack Gibbons got beat one-on-one in week 1, and Julius Chestnut got beat one-on-one in week 2. Well, if there are enough players getting beat every single week, then it's on the coaches. Someone has to take accountability. So if Colt Anderson can't get this thing together in the next few weeks, they're going to have to let him go. There's no way around it. So the turnover battle on offense and defense, the passing game in general, and then the special teams, coverage, and blocking have to get better, or this team is never going to be able to turn things around. But let me know what you think needs to happen down below. That's going to do it for me. Tighten up in the chat, thumbs up on the video as well. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this is Locked On Titans.